What if someone, just a regular person like you or me, could be talked into hurting a stranger, causing them terrible pain? And what if they knew it was wrong, felt that knot in their stomach telling them to stop, but did it anyway? Back in the early 1960s, a really controversial experiment suggested that a shocking 65% of us would do exactly that, all because a guy in a lab coat told them to. This is the story of Stanley Milgram's obedience experiments. It's a deep dive into what makes us tick, and it left a huge mark on psychology and ethics. It really makes you wonder, could any of us become dangerous? The man, the question, and the times, the setup. The world was still trying to make sense of the horrors of World War II and the Holocaust. How could ordinary people take part in such awful things, or just stand by and let them happen? This question bugged a lot of people, including a young social psychologist at Yale University named Stanley Milgram. He wasn't buying the idea that the people who did terrible things were just born evil. He had a hunch that the situation itself, especially the pressure to obey someone in charge, played a much bigger role than most folks wanted to believe. Milgram wondered if that old excuse, "I was just following orders," used by Nazi officials at the Nuremberg trials, actually held some uncomfortable truth about all of us. So, to figure this out, Milgram cooked up an experiment that, on the face of it, looked like it was about memory and learning. He got everyday guys from all sorts of backgrounds to sign up using newspaper ads and mailers, offering them a bit of cash for their time. These volunteers were told they'd be part of a study to see if punishment helped people learn better. They had no idea they were about to walk into a major moral test, one that would shake their beliefs and show a surprising willingness to obey. The setup was pretty clever in its trickery. Each participant met another supposed volunteer, a friendly, quiet man who was actually an actor, in on Milgram's plan. Through a rigged draw, the real participant always ended up as the teacher, and the actor became the learner. The learner was then strapped into a chair in the next room with an electrode on his wrist. The teacher sat in front of this impressive-looking shock machine. This thing had a row of 30 switches, each marked with a voltage, starting at 15 volts and going up by 15 volts all the way to a scary 450 volts. The switches also had labels like slight, shock, moderate shock, danger, severe shock, and then, chillingly, exact over the last two. To make it all seem real, the teacher got a sample shock of 45 volts, a genuine, though small, jolt to show the machine worked. The stage was set, not just for a showdown between teacher and learner, but for a battle inside the teacher himself. The shocks begin, the experiment unfolds. The job seemed simple enough. The teacher would read a list of word pairs to the learner. Then the teacher would say the first word of a pair, and the learner had to pick the matching word from 4 choices. If the learner got it right, they moved on. If he got it wrong, the experimenter, a serious, authoritative guy in a gray lab coat, told the teacher to give an electric shock. And here's the kicker. With every wrong answer, the teacher was supposed to crank up the shock level by 1 notch. But here's the thing. The learner wasn't actually getting shocked at all. His reactions were all pre-recorded and played back at certain shock levels, creating a very convincing show of suffering. As the supposed voltage went up, the learner's protest got louder. At 75 volts, a grunt. At 120 volts, he'd shout that the shocks were painful. By 150 volts, he'd yell, "Experimenter, get me out of here. I won't be in the experiment anymore. I refuse to go on." At 270 volts, a scream of agony. At 300 volts, he'd bang on the wall, complain about a heart problem, and desperately beg to be let out. After 330 volts, just silence. The experimenter told the teacher to treat silence as a wrong answer and keep shocking. You could see many participants getting incredibly stressed and torn as they moved up the shock board. They'd sweat, tremble, stutter, bite their lips, groan, and even dig their fingernails into their own skin. Some would plead with the learner, begging him to get the answers right. Others would burst into nervous laughter or act in other strange ways. Over and over, they'd turn to the experimenter, questioning what was happening, worrying about the learner, and saying they wanted to stop. But the experimenter, the authority figure, was trained to respond with a series of prods said in a firm but calm voice. Please continue. If the teacher still hesitated, the experiment requires that you continue. If they kept resisting, it is absolutely essential that you continue. And finally, you have no other choice. You must go on. For many, these prods were all it took. The presence and insistence of this authority figure, often seen as a legitimate scientist from a top university like Yale, created a huge amount of pressure. Participants found themselves stuck in a horrible spot. Their own conscience was screaming at them to stop, but there was this powerful urge to obey the person in charge who, in some versions of the experiment, even said he'd take full responsibility. 65%, the shocking results. Before he even started, Milgram asked psychiatrists, college students, and regular middle-class adults to guess how far participants would go. Almost everyone thought that very few, maybe just a handful of really sadistic people, would go all the way to the 450-volt shock. Psychiatrists guessed only about 1 in 1,000 would do it. The actual results, they were horrifying. They sent shockwaves through the scientific world and the general public. In the main version of the experiment, an incredible 65% of participants, that's almost 2 out of every 3 ordinary people, obeyed the experimenter and gave the full 450-volt shock. This was even when the learner had gone silent, meaning he could have been unconscious or even worse. Out of the 40 participants in that first study, 26 went all the way. Nobody stopped before 300 volts, which was when the learner started pounding on the wall and begging to be let out. And this wasn't just a fluke. Milgram ran 18 different versions of this experiment, with over 600 people in total, while the exact number of people who obeyed changed depending on things like how close the learner was, or if other people in the room refused to go on. The main finding was still deeply unsettling. A lot of people were capable of hurting an innocent person when someone in authority told them to. The initial thought that Americans, supposedly so individualistic, would be less obedient than people from more authoritarian countries, that was completely blown out of the water. Milgram had originally planned to compare American results with German ones, but the American obedience levels were so high he figured he didn't even need to. Section 4. The fallout, ethical firestorm, and damaged trust. The moment Milgram's findings came out in 1963, all hell broke loose. While the results were undeniably huge, the ethics of the experiment were, and still are, hotly debated. The biggest worry was the severe psychological stress put on the participants. They truly believed they were hurting another human being, and this caused intense anxiety, guilt, and internal conflict. One participant was recorded saying, "I think he's trying to communicate. He's knocking, well, it's not fair to shock the guy. These are terrific volts. I don't think this is very humane. Oh, I can't go on with this. No, this isn't right." Many felt this level of emotional harm was just not acceptable. Deception was baked into the experiment from the start. Participants were lied to about what the study was really for, whether the shocks were real, and the fact that the learner was an actor. Milgram argued this deception was needed to genuinely study obedience, but critics shot back that it violated the participants' right to know what they were signing up for. They hadn't agreed to be put through such an emotionally wrenching experience. The right to withdraw was another big issue. Even though participants were technically free to leave, the experimenters' constant prods like, "You have no other choice. You must go on," made it incredibly hard for them to actually walk out. This pressure to keep going, critics said, undermined the whole idea that they were there voluntarily. The debriefing process after the Milgram experiment was a crucial step in ensuring the well-being of participants. Although Milgram claimed to have debriefed participants, some accounts suggest that this wasn't always done promptly or effectively. Some individuals may have left the lab still, believing they had caused harm, potentially leading to lasting psychological issues. The Milgram experiment sparked intense discussions about research ethics, shedding light on the potential for psychological harm in research studies and the necessity for stricter regulations. This outcry ultimately contributed to the establishment and reinforcement of institutional review boards, IRBs. These independent committees oversee research involving human subjects to safeguard their rights and welfare. Concepts such as informed consent, minimizing harm, and the right to withdraw became imperative in ethical research practices. In exploring the psychology behind why participants obeyed orders to inflict pain, Milgram introduced the agentic state theory. This theory suggests that individuals can transition into a state where they see themselves as mere agents following commands from a legitimate authority figure. Personal responsibility diminishes in this state, reminding participants of their accountability, significantly reduced obedience rates. Conversely, when the experimenter claimed responsibility, many initially hesitant participants continued with the experiment. The perceived legitimacy of the authority figure played a pivotal role in obedience. The experimenter's scientific authority, symbolized by the lab coat, and association with prestigious institutions like Yale University, influenced participants' compliance. Additionally, the gradual increase in shock levels, known as the foot-in-the-door technique, made it easier for participants to rationalize each escalation of harm. Binding factors also played a significant role in obedience. Participants felt obligated to continue the study, influenced by financial compensation and reluctance to challenge the scientific authority figure. Milgram's findings resonated with Hannah Arendt's concept of the banality of evil, emphasizing the mundane nature of carrying out harmful acts under authority. The Milgram experiment underscored the importance of ethical considerations in research and highlighted the complex psychological dynamics at play in obedience to authority. The Milgram experiment has raised significant questions about human behavior, challenging the idea that only bad people do bad things. Instead, it demonstrated how easily ordinary people can be pushed to act against their own conscience when an authority figure exerts pressure on them. This has had a lasting and uncomfortable impact on our understanding of human behavior, particularly in situations where there are hierarchies and pressure to obey authority. Recent research looking at Milgram's archives has uncovered new perspectives on the participants' behavior during the experiment. Some researchers argue that the participants weren't just blindly obeying, they were actively identifying with the scientific goals of the experiment. This engaged followership model suggests that participants may have kept going because they believed they were contributing to something valuable. On the other hand, evidence from the archives also suggests that many participants doubted if the learner was really being harmed, and those who were more suspicious of the setup were more likely to disobey. This highlights the complexity of the experiment and brings into question how much skepticism there really was among the participants. Despite the ethical drama surrounding the experiment, its impact on our understanding of human behavior has been long-lasting. It has not only challenged our perception of past historical horrors like the Holocaust, but also remains relevant today. The study has helped us understand workplace dynamics, military behavior, and healthcare settings where there are hierarchical structures and pressure to obey authority figures ethically. The experiment has forced all fields involving human subjects to face tough questions about balancing the search for knowledge with protecting the participants in studies. As a result, strict ethical guidelines and review processes have been put in place, thanks in no small part to the issues raised by controversial studies like the Milgram experiment. These ongoing discussions are a crucial reminder of how power can be abused and why it's essential to encourage critical thinking and moral courage in all aspects of life. Replications of the Milgram experiment, conducted with improved ethical standards, have consistently yielded similar results. In terms of obedience levels, albeit sometimes slightly lower, this indicates that the fundamental findings of the study remain relevant and valid even today. Reflecting on the title of our discussion, Dangerous People or Just People, brings up a crucial point. The term dangerous carries significant implications, but in reality, many participants in the experiment displayed extreme distress while complying with the authority figure's commands. Rather, than labeling individuals as inherently dangerous. The study highlights a human inclination to follow authority, even at the expense of our own moral beliefs. It suggests that certain circumstances can compel individuals to behave in harmful ways. Considering the latter part of our title, or are they, prompts us to delve deeper into this complex issue. Perhaps the perceived danger is not a fixed characteristic found in 65% of the population, but rather a vulnerability that we all share to some degree: the susceptibility to peer pressure, the perceived legitimacy of authority figures, and the gradual erosion of our resistance under persistent demands. The experiment does not simply identify a specific percentage of dangerous individuals. Instead, it underscores a human propensity that under specific conditions can lead to detrimental actions. Alternative interpretations such as engaged followership or the impact of participants questioning the experiment's validity further complicate the notion of innate danger or blind obedience in individuals. It underscores the intricate interplay of social context, belief systems, and situational pressures in shaping human behavior. Now, let me pose a question to you. How would you honestly react in a similar scenario? The Milgram experiment serves as a powerful mirror that compels us to reflect and question ourselves. If you found this exploration of human nature intriguing or disquieting, please show your support by liking and sharing this video with others who may appreciate this profound analysis. For more thought-provoking content, challenging conventional perspectives on the mind and society, be sure to subscribe and activate notifications. We eagerly await your thoughts and responses in the comments section. What aspect of the experiment surprised or disturbed you the most? Stanley Milgram's obedience studies continue to spark controversy and discussion, highlighting a discomforting reality. The boundary between good and evil may be more fluid than we wish to acknowledge. The research demonstrates that ordinary individuals, under the influence of authority, can be compelled to commit acts they would typically find reprehensible. While debates surrounding the study's methodologies persist, the fundamental questions raised by Milgram about authority, accountability, and the essence of humanity remain as pertinent and challenging today as they were half a century ago. The experiment is not merely an examination of the supposed 65%. It serves as a stark caution and a poignant reminder to remain vigilant against the abuse of authority in any context. It compels us not to ask solely if others are dangerous, but also to ponder under what circumstances we ourselves could potentially exhibit such behavior.